Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildred, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, coming to us from the Yellow Hand, and the creator of Simulacrum, the one and only Jay Sojdelius. I'm hoping I got that right.
Close enough.
How you doing today, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing good. Mother Nature is wreaking havoc on my senses, but but I knew what I signed up for in being where I am.
Yeah.
Just the last week, she can't seem to make up her mind whether she wants to have warm days or cold days. And there was a chance of snow over the weekend.
Oh, lovely. Makes for an interesting experience.
Yeah. And there's usually one last laugh from Old Man Winter before spring finally sets in.
Yeah, I never count spring as a given fact until that last thing has happened.
Well, if I recall, you're in the Midwest. There is no such thing as spring or fall in the Midwest. There's just winter and not winter.
That's true, and it goes on and off and on and off and on and off all the time.
Mm-hmm. This is why I've said Mother Nature is on the drugs. All of them. Even the ones that haven't been made yet. But one of the traditions around here is opening with the humble beginnings, in a sense. So, walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Oh, that's an interesting question. So my first introduction was through a catalog, a mail order catalog. So I'm from Sweden originally, and while it had a surge of popularity, role-playing games and strategic war games in the late 70s, early 80s, it was still not very widespread, so you couldn't go into a store and find it. You'd have to order it through a mail order catalog. And I remember this mail order catalog very vividly because I had somehow gotten hold of a magazine that had some gaming ads in it and realized that this is something new. This is not, because I've always been very much into games. I was a compulsive board game creator as a kid. I would games and modify games left and right, even as a 5-year-old. And seeing this ad and then reaching out and getting this mail order catalog, I started kind of imagining what these things would be based on what it said in the catalog. And it wasn't much more than a product listing. So I was mostly just going off of what the games were called. And then I remember just taking a gamble and ordering something. And then I figured I probably interpreted it as much as I actually read it and applied it. It was an idea of what these games could be, and then realizing that they are that, and they're more. This was the first one not actually the first one I played, but the first one I bought was Traveler. This was that the second edition, the book Traveler.
What year are we talking? Because I could probably narrow it down a little bit.
This would have been 1981.
All right, so
it could have been in 82.
81, 82, so that would now, of course, I am accounting for the fact that I'm using when they came out in the States. There was probably a bit of a stagger, but
most of the role-playing games in Sweden, as at least as far as I was aware, came from the UK, and in many cases they were just they were imports and sent onwards. But you also had a lot of UK publishers making their own edition of something. Like we
Yeah.
had the first game I actually played was RuneQuest, and this was the Games Workshop edition of it.
Yeah, and
I believe.
the Games Workshop version of RuneQuest is a weird beast.
Yes, it is.
It's one of those things that's almost been decanonized in the years since. But if we're talking, if given the year that we're talking, if if it had the GDW label on it, it was probably the new era.
Right.
That can
I don't remember if it did actually, and I wondered, do I still have it? No, I don't. No, I don't think it was labeled Games Workshop. I think we found out the
Game Designers Workshop, or GDW.
No, this was definitely the UK publisher.
Yeah,
Games Workshop.
if
and they did do editions of a lot of different. I think a lot of them were Chaosium, but it was a lot of different games that they put out.
yeah, if that's the case, it probably. I could see it being maybe Mega Traveler or the new era. I can't see it being the original classic because that was all the way back in '77.
You mean you're talking Traveler now? I was talking about RuneQuest. Yeah. RuneQuest was the Games Workshop edition. The Traveler one was the American GDW edition. Sure.
Yeah, if that's the case, it was probably the new era, given the timeline.
I'm pretty sure this was not it, and in fact, I do have it on my shelf. This was the first time. So it had been in these in a box and in these little booklets, these double stitched booklets before, and this was the first time they put it out as a hardcover book, which was the one that we got, or the one that I bought. And I don't know what the provenance is, like how it came to Sweden and how the store imported it, but it exploded pretty quickly from there. And I remember the thing that made it stick for me was the creation of characters, because I was also an avid comic book fan and I drew my own comics and stuff, so I was very into creating characters and designing them and coming up with their behaviors and stuff. So it really appealed to me for that reason. It took me a while to realize the full extent of the game rules, what they were intended for, and the kind of pseudo acting aspect of role-playing games. But it started really with character creation. That was what stuck with me from the beginning.
Yeah, and obviously Traveler is both famous and infamous for its life path character creation and the fact that you can die during character creation.
Yeah, this it was a rabbit hole for sure. It was very easy also to create other, like based on their blueprint with the classes of characters or the types of characters, and it would be a book for each one of them. Then you create your own, and then come up with your own kind of rules for how to create a certain character of a certain type. That was also very appealing.
Oh yeah, and I think it's one of those things that was very flexible and obviously would parry over into other scenarios, which is how we get stuff like Twilight 2000.
Yes, very much.
I never ran too much of Twilight 2000 up until the recent version through Free League, but I would certainly be more willing to run that than I would Phoenix Command, which I tried around the same time. Phoenix Command is in the short list of things I will never run again unless I'm paid, and I can guarantee you can't afford the asking price.
I think I took one look at that system and kind of abandoned it.
The last time I talked about it was when I was covering the Free League Alien game, and because I had opened up with, finally, an Alien game I can actually recommend to people.
Yeah.
Because the Aliens adventure game was very 90s. Very early 90s, and that's not exactly a compliment.
I tried to get my hands on that. It's kind of hard to find.
yeah, it didn't have much of a print. It didn't have much of a print run. Um,
Yeah,
and it's in the early '90s. There seemed to be this massive obsession with trying to be as simulation-y as possible to the point of having skill lists that were borderline offensive in terms of how many skills they felt they needed to put
yeah,
in, and only
yep,
maybe
yep.
1/10 of that skill list you're actually going to use more than
If
once.
that, if that, yeah. That's actually what you're putting your finger on there. That's actually one of the imperatives for why I created the system that Simulacrum is based on, and which was first applied in my fantasy role playing game called Draconicus, and also in Tales of Menace and Mystery, which is my old
Hmm.
RPG. I wanted to get rid of skills because to me they're laundry lists that you have to go through, even though very little of it applies to your character. I mean, the bulk of it does not actually apply to your character, and if you look at the character sheet, it's just a long list of stuff that you don't even need to look at.
Yeah, and I think I jokingly said when we have to try and figure out the day-to-day economic life of people in a medieval time for the purposes of developing a proper skill list, I think we've crossed a threshold.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it becomes a purpose in and of its own, where that that's what you do. It's not necessarily role playing anymore.
yeah, and I certainly, obviously with my own project, I use skills, but um, the approach I've taken is a small but um, multi-purpose list of skills.
Right.
Uh, which I think I think the problem with the way skills worked, especially back in the early '90s, was each of them was very one note and doing one particular thing,
True. Yeah.
and there was also the fact that developing them was divorced from each other. And I think of it like a athlete. Is an athlete going to be learning running and jumping separately?
True. Yeah.
Like, think of
No, that's kind of also hinting a little bit at my approach to it. I was thinking of it in a kind of a laddering approach. So instead of starting from the bottom, start from the top. What is it that you start by learning? Well, it's
mhm,
probably some sort of profession or some sort of role, and then those then drill down into increasing levels of specialization. And you only need to define the specializations, because the rest of it will be taken care of by assuming that you have a rough idea of how to do everything within your profession. You have increasingly specific knowledge about how to do things that become specialized tasks within that profession. So that's kind of how I
mhm.
approached it. So you can have a better chance of doing something that is within your profession than someone who's a layperson, but you will not have as good of a chance to do something well as someone who's specialized in that thing, and that thing should ladder up into the profession itself. That was at least my
Mhm.
thinking.
Yeah, now with Simulacrum itself, uh, this is billed as a cyberpunk espionage game, and I am there's not that many. There's plenty of cyberpunk games out there, but ones that double down specifically on cyberpunk meets espionage, or as I call it, spyberpunk.
Hmm.
There aren't that many, and I'm curious what some of the inspirations were, so the Appendix N, as it were, for Simulacrum.
Well, so the idea of combining it with espionage came directly from one specific movie, and basically attaching that movie to the literature of Philip K. Dick. So I confess I'm more of a Philip K. Dick fan than I am a cyberpunk fan. Although I am a cyberpunk fan, but uh, it started with Philip K. Dick for me, and there are certain aspects of cyberpunk that are less interesting to me, and perhaps that's informed by my readership of
Hmm.
Dick's literature. And some of that is the tech. The tech is inevitable; you have to have it, but it's never been a big focus in Dick's writing. And so I've sort of put that as a side thing. And then instead, I married it to the idea of espionage to give characters agency in a cyberpunk world, because I see cyberpunk settings usually as victimizing the characters. The characters are victims; they exist within it, but they have to eke out some sort of existence within its limits. And it's obviously oppressive, since we're talking a dystopian society here. But by making it into espionage, we can pose the characters as um, um, those who go in and try to wrestle something from that system, and become heroes in that context, which I think is missing in a lot of cyberpunk. And the movie that I saw and that I wanted to in some way incorporate, or at least some of the themes, is not a cyberpunk movie necessarily. It's a movie called Sneakers from 1992 with Robert Redford and others, River Phoenix, Sidney Poitier, Dan Aykroyd is in it also, I think. The idea there was that, so that's more of a mercenary team who does certain espionage missions, and get involved in a larger conspiracy, and trying to fight against it, and where each character in the team has a very well-defined role, so that it becomes about teamwork, as opposed to what you get in cyberpunk. Otherwise, you get very individualized characters, because that's what they are, a lot of them. You can't really see Deckard being part of a team. That's not really what that character is.
And
so constructing this kind of a setup where you're fighting the nature of the oppressive corporate rule, and you're doing it as a team, that to me gave a little bit of a different spin on, and it's more like this cyberpunk construct is a mechanism that you're trying to hack or unwind or what have you.
Yeah, and truth be told, I've had a few hot takes regarding Cyberpunk and my issues with it from a narrative as well as a gameplay sense. One of them is, and this has gotten me in some hot water, but I am nothing else if not a man of controversy. I think the way people view Cyberpunk is still very rooted in futurism, what futurists thought was circa the 1980s.
Right, yeah, that's true.
And I'm not saying, oh, it needs to adapt to keep with the times. I'm saying it is still depicting a future the way futurists saw things in the 80s.
Yeah.
And like the way they see corporations. Very much feels like a futurist interpretation of the corporate raider problem that was all over the financial world in the 1980s.
Right, yeah.
Guys like Carl Icahn, who has an entire, if you look up corporate raiders on an image search, he has an entire subsection dedicated to himself. He was the inspiration for the character Gordon Gekko in the film Wall Street.
Right, yeah.
And I could bring up the whole TWA thing, but that's a whole other kettle of fish when it came to corporate raiding. And
I think the point there that I would make is that that takes it out of futurism, really, because this is something that I felt very much while writing Simulacrum. It's a lens to view the current timeline, and the kind of political reality of it, because if you really want to be futurist, you lose that kind of political dimension, or it becomes an entirely different political dimension, perhaps.
And that's just one angle of it. But there are other things, like the way cybernetics is treated, especially in a lot of the heavy hitters when it comes to cyberpunk role-playing games. Your cyberpunks, your shadowruns, and the like, where this idea of taking cybernetics is eroding your humanity.
Right.
And now, I think Pondsmith had cited the the whole steroid scandals that were happening in the 80s as a point of reference. But then when you look at certain works that or certain, like say Ghost in the Shell, where it's not uncommon to have someone who has a full conversion body and is still
Right.
human, um, there's a bit of a disconnect that ends up being created.
Yeah.
And you are correct when you mentioned there's that issue of a very individualist basis for making characters. What's kind of fun was kind of funny about that is when I look at the big two that everyone brings up in the space, again, Cyberpunk and Shadowrun.
Yeah.
Shadowrun tries to go freeform, but in practice it isn't.
Hmm.
In practice, you have somebody who is the designated hacker. You have someone who's the designated faceman. You have somebody who's the designated mage.
Oh, and also, I mean, it hews towards Dungeons and Dragons, and you couldn't get more formulaic than that. So it's really not being freeform at all. It's tying itself to a whole set of
it's
content.
in the case of Shadowrun, it's more of, if you look at the actual character creation setup, it proclaims itself to be freeform, but in practice, there are certain archetypes that are going to emerge. And
For sure.
so when you have somebody for whom hacking is their specialty, nobody else is going to be inclined to take that particular spot, and that's not a criticism of game design. That's just human nature. Nobody's gonna field a football team with three quarterbacks.
Right, yeah.
And you would do, and I'm guessing, like there's been plenty of games that do the archetypes or do classes in more fantasy games, but something that I think is underutilized, and maybe this is something you were trying to touch on, is the idea of you are part of a team built into how characters are built and played.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a very specific conceptual anchor in doing that, and this also kind of informed the game system itself, and in fact you may even say that it informed the choice of marrying cyberpunk to espionage. And this may perhaps surprise some people, but I took a lot of inspiration from the old James Bond 007 role-playing game from Victory Games.
Oh yeah,
it's always been
I've
my
got
favorites. It's one of my favorites, and where we had the most success in playing it, and where it was the most fun, was when we took it away from this ridiculous notion that you can be, five secret agents running around doing stuff, and that doesn't attract attention to itself. And when you consider that a secret agent probably needs to be very nondescript and not noticeable, which James Bond very much is not. We instead began designing teams, and we played it 2 and 2. So I played it with more groups. They were always 2 characters, and we looked at the kind of buddy format that you have in a lot of cop movies and a lot of action movies, and that worked a lot better because suddenly we were designing a team that would riff off of each other. And it's not as ridiculous to say you have the old, what was that called? The Persuaders, was that the title, with Roger Moore and Tony Curtis?
I think. Don't quote me on that. Oh, and truth be sorry to cut off.
Yeah, so designing duos, designing teams like that, and so that became also a foundation for character creation here. I also borrowed some from the game system itself, which I think is very elegant, and I've always enjoyed.
Oddly enough, I remember that kind of situation coming up for me personally when I was running Doctor Who, because not everybody can be the Doctor.
Oh,
much like how you can't have a party full of main characters.
No.
And unfortunately, with Doctor Who, I was able to sidestep it with, you are all members of UNIT.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh, and there are certain settings that lend itself more easily to that, like say the laundry files, which can basically be described as an underfunded version of the Men in Black. Uh,
Uh,
you are complete.
well, actually, it's interesting because um, this makes me think of there's been cases where the reverse has been done. So you have characters, and then you add sort of sub characters or helpers or what have you. And the Ars Magica comes to mind.
Yeah,
But
Ars Magica with its passion play design. Uh,
yeah, but I've always wondered why hasn't anybody, or maybe someone has, but I'm unaware of it. Why hasn't someone done the opposite, where you basically have, a Doctor Who or an iconic top level character that is essentially an NPC, or maybe a character that all players, have a hand in making decisions for, and all the regular characters are then assistants of this main character.
I
Um,
have seen that a couple times, but
yeah,
it's in very specific scenarios.
right,
Now,
right, and not the whole game, maybe.
um, it's it's like when I think of that, one of the big things that comes to mind, oddly enough, is the Conan board game that Nexus made in the mid 2000s, where
Uh-huh.
nobody controls Conan. You're controlling the nations of Hyperborea, but
Right,
through doing certain actions, you can maneuver Conan to your own advantage.
right, right,
Uh,
right. So a little indirectly, yeah.
uh, the other one that comes to mind is the dual adventure scenario in Sword World 2. I think it was 2.0. It was either 2.0 or 2.5. I can't recall. And where the idea was you were acting as both playing and advising a prince or a princess character.
Okay.
Uh, and I don't want to get too deep into the Sword World rabbit hole because it is quite a deep one that I've been covering quite a lot on the channel, and found out that some people have been exposed to Sword World through my videos, which certainly a feather in my cap.
Hmm.
But the the idea with that adventure is the the NPC that is the prince or princess is already established. You're trying to guide them into certain decisions
Sure.
through your actions and in that. And I think the reason there haven't been many games that try to build around that as their core mechanic comes down to a couple things. One, people want the power fantasy, and
Yeah.
two, there's the issue of people arguing over who is going to be that main character,
Yeah.
as well as there's the mindset that if somebody's just a supporting character for someone else's story, they feel like they're a third wheel at the table.
This was one of the interesting and challenging aspects of we spoke about RuneQuest before, and obviously it has the game have for all the characters, it has a very clear kind of goal to shoot towards, which is to become a rune master, but it kind of implies that all the characters have to make process or progress towards that goal
Mm-hmm.
in similar steps or at a similar pace, because otherwise you get one character who's a rune master and the others who are not, and then that's going to really skew the game quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I I think I suppose the you are part of an organization is the most common kind of compromise,
Yeah,
because
sure.
because you can have that kind of thing, but also give a proper direction where everybody feels like their contribution has an impact.
Yeah,
Uh, I'm not discounting the whole you are the supporting character for someone else's story,
right.
but I understand why there's hesitancy in doing it.
Yeah, and it might become a novelty as opposed to something you can sustain for a longer period of time.
Yeah, there's also
Like
the fact that
how
if it's built around a certain NPC, uh, there's a bottleneck on how much you can do with that.
for sure. Yeah.
Uh, but one particular bit of infamy that often happens with cyberpunk RPGs and some science fiction RPGs is just throwing people into the middle of the pool and saying swim, damn it. Um, I hate to keep picking on Shadowrun, but it's a perfect example of this, where it says, okay, you've got 45 karma, spend it how you want.
Mhm.
Which, if you've been around the block a few times, it's not going to be a problem. But if it's your first, second, or third time playing, you got no idea what to do or what to do right, so you're not an anchor, and nobody wants to be an anchor on the party.
True.
Uh, and is that kind of thing something you attempted to address with Simulacrum, of making it so that it's, I won't say easy, but smooth to create characters?
Yeah, I mean, mechanically creating characters in Simulacrum is very easy. It's very quick, and it gives you a lot of um, pings to bounce off of, where you can have ideas about your character. So it's really more improvised, and it gives you a lot of ideas as character creation goes on.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an element of, swim damn it, in that the setting itself is deliberately designed to be unknown to you. So essentially, if you imagine yourself as a spy in the Cold War era, and someone says to you, "You got to go into West Berlin," you might have some intel on that, but um, I've kind of exacerbated or exaggerated the amount of blockaging that comes from within this environment that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be jumping into. So there's only so much that you can know, and that kind of puts all the characters on an even footing. They know next to nothing, and they have to jump in and swim,
Mm-hmm.
because the world that they're trying to enter, which is Neo City, it's the main setting of Simulacrum, it is so well guarded and so well protected, and it's essentially a walled off Silicon Valley, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
with some West Berlin parallels. So I don't know if that's it would qualify as addressing that issue, but I think it takes away some of the opportunity for um, you know optimizing your character for a certain type of action or whatever, because you don't really know what's going to be happening, and there's no way for you to know until you actually play it.
Yeah, I'd say from what I've seen with just the quick start, I'd say that the now with the swim damage problem when it's in character creation is a bigger problem than when it's in, say, gameplay or role playing.
For sure.
Because
Yeah.
on the role play side, as a player, there's going to be plenty of stuff that you don't know, namely the entirety of what the GM has planned for the adventure, unless it's a
Yeah.
published adventure that you've already read, which in that kind of form, it's bad form to use that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
Um,
True.
Although it might be fun to have somebody who's already read it, who's playing a character who's from the future in a all you need is kill kind of way.
That would be kind of fun. Yeah.
Uh,
Could be fodder for a scenario. Yeah. I mean, I've not deliberately tried to take that out of character creation, but I have steered more towards the notion of creating an interesting character, that sparks some ideas,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to getting bogged down in rules optimizing and thinking, what do I need to?
Min maxing and munchkinism.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. So it's not like I consciously try to limit that, but I had a different goal in mind for character creation, and that goes away from entirely from that
a
aspect
very
of it.
easy way to get rid of that issue is by making it very clear where a given campaign setting takes place.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
a game that's just trying to be generic fantasy is going to have that issue more often than not, because there's no real direction. But by saying you are operatives working for some kind of employer in Neo City, you don't have you already. I won't say you get rid of the problem, but you do minimize it,
Yeah,
because you're not just some rando. You are somebody who has some sort of footprint within this area.
Yeah. And there's also the opportunity for the GM to parry a little bit of this min-maxing,
Mm-hmm.
because what plays a fairly big part in it is who are you working for and what's the objective. So there's the notion of employers here. They're all going to want to send you into Neo City, but they're going to have different motivations for doing it, and that is also going to affect exactly what they expect you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the GM, if the GM notices that something is going, or character creation is going in a certain direction, uh, you could tweak the kind of employer situation, and thereby getting, you know, a slightly different flavor of the
Mm-hmm.
adventures that you play.
Oh yeah, and when it comes to it looks to me that when it comes to the actually taking actions that may have a risk, the tasks, as it were. Uh, a lot of it does seem to be built around. I believe you're using a D. I believe you are using a D10. Uh,
For humans, yes.
mhm. With with the idea being you're unless I'm mistaken, you're setting a bunch of stuff up, and no matter what, you're rolling. I believe a single die, and comparing that with the either a single die, or you're keeping a single die, um, and comparing that to the difficulty.
Yeah, that's true. You can roll up to 3 dice depending on your experience or your natural ability, and you always pick the highest die, and that is the one that
Hmm.
gets that indicates the result.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those is that when it comes to those three dice, is that the hard cap that no matter what you cannot get more than three, or are there options to get more?
Not in the current version of the game, but this is kind of the balance of humans against other humans, or humans against animals, or humans against, you know, maybe in the such as in this case, you would have, you know, synthetic humans that might have a little bit of an uptick or an advantage, and then might be using a D12 or a D20 even.
Hmm.
But we have toyed with so the game scales through which die you use, but it could theoretically scale through how many dice you use as well. So we are toying with the as an example with, you know, would this system lend itself to a superhero RPG, for instance, and could you boost your number of dice even higher? The only thing that the number of dice that they do for you is that they produce a higher likelihood of a higher result, obviously. So it wouldn't necessarily the thing that brings you into, you know, superhuman levels would be like using a D100 instead of a D10. Then clearly there's a scale there, and there's a power advantage.
Hmm. Which and I can certainly see it. The When I look at the things that can create that die pool, whether it be your natural abilities, whether it be professions or capabilities, or the like, um, what is something that I'm considering is what happens if the total of those things adds up to something higher than three.
Right. And that's something like currently, um, that's definitely an open possibility, but it's not something that within the current um, games that are using it, the current settings that are using it, which is Draconicus Fantasy, Tales of Menace and Mystery, Pulp, and then Simulacrum, which is cyberpunk or sci-fi.
Hmm.
We haven't had a reason to explore that particular kind of scaling,
Yeah.
but I could see, you know, if we're talking about, you know, if we go even further into sci-fi, I can definitely see a scenario where that
Yeah.
becomes a possibility, and it could also then have the requisite. I think that the limit to something when you're using like a percentage system, for instance, is that there's no possibility for surprise. You know that, oh well, someone could be really good and have 99, but that's as far as it goes. But here we have the possibility to introduce a yet another dimension of scaling, which would then provide some sort of the intended effect would be to make players feel some sort of awe. If you start to introduce gods into a scenario, then you want that reaction, right? You want that feeling of like they were insufficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly see that. And admittedly, it's one of those things here where it is somewhat mitigated by the fact that you're either using attribute or experience, unless the GM forces you to use one or the other.
Yep.
And this does not appear to be one of those cases where the broader attribute is used and then in combination with the particular skill. Like you're not using physique
right.
and brawn as a combination, like
right.
in say World of Darkness. You're just using one or the other.
Yeah, and well, there is the combination of physique versus psyche, but that is just as much about at some point a character might need to
hold on one moment, folks. I think we have some
just cross or animal, what have you. You may only need the physique or the psyche attribute, and you don't necessarily need to, because they're not going to be featured that prominently. That was one of the reasons for that.
Yeah, I can
up to, but the choice. So yeah, go ahead.
So, I think the next thing I'm getting into is because I've covered different cyberpunk games over the years, and there are some that are certainly more high risk than others. I'd say a big example would be the Gaia Complex, which makes it very clear that it is going to be a highly lethal affair.
Right.
Are you in that similar vein where the lack of planning and a few good hits could easily drop you?
No, actually, not. And part of that is due to the setting, because there's a heroic kind of aspect to this, and I wanted to give players agency to basically strike back at the corporate rulers, and for that reason, I've kind of put limits on the lethality in the setting itself. So there's a lot of lethality outside of Neo City, but one thing that I figured early on that wouldn't make sense would be for a high-tech society that is where there's there's basically police control of almost anything, and if they had that control, they wouldn't necessarily allow for the chance of for instance, property damage. If you have a world that is limited and there's limited resources, and you have the power to control everything, why would you allow people to run around and have the power to blow up stuff and cause a lot of damage that really benefits a particular part of society in no way? So a little bit I wanted to get at the feeling of the characters being able to do more than the regular people in the setting, the NPCs, and not have to constantly be super worried about lethality, so that there's action and you can get bogged down, you can get injured and all that kind of stuff, but instant lethality I did not want to be too much of a factor, and I mean, without it being intended as comedic effect, there is an element of the stormtrooper involvement in firefights in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
You want there to be a risk involved, yes, but you want that to be mostly from an action perspective, not necessarily a fear of death perspective.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly get that. And one of the other big elephants in the room when you're dealing with cyberpunk games is the hacking problem. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of games that have done, because obviously hacking is going to be a part of the culture of cyberpunk. There's no getting around that. But one of the issues that often comes up is when you have an extensive subsystem for the way hacking works, when you're trying to get past security or the like, it ends up creating this duet moment between the hacker and the GM, while everybody
Yeah.
else doesn't have a whole lot of input. Uh, is that something that you plan to address so that the hacker part of it is not doing a duet per se?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I mean, first of all, I think that this is one of the things that it's if it's pervasive, then all characters should have some sort of ability in that regard. But these are actually, we have four.
Oh,
As a GM, you have a choice. Then you can take virtual reality or what have you. You
mhm,
take those out, and those are not part of your game. So instead of including them in great detail in the base game, we're coming out with four different technological source books. So one will cover
mhm,
Nano, the first one that comes out.
mhm.
Now, nanotech would be the one that comes the closest to, what we might call magic. It would be, the unexplainable technology where
Mhm.
we can read it.
Yeah, I remember Numenera doing its own take on nanomachines as magic with the nano archetype, basically being a mage that's manipulating these nanites.
In this way, but we want action without having this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I can get that. Now, I think one of the other things to delve into is kind of what I mentioned before when it comes to the cybernetic part, the whether it be cyberware, whether it be chipping in or something like that. There's it's with the way that I'm looking at the sheet that you have here. Um, it seems to me that if a
Getting some
character has some sort of cybernetics, that's just equipment for them.
right. I missed part of what you were saying there. I said, don't know if it's me having audio issues or what it is.
I think it was a case of. Well, first off, am I coming through proper now? Uh, so it might be a case of Discord just deciding to hang out. So,
I cannot hear you.
testing, 1 2 1 2. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog.
It's good at typographic reference. Yes, I can hear you. Can you
Y-
hear me?
yes. Uh, I think one of the things I was going to ask on, especially given the nature of cybernetics, is um, the concept of meshing that you have in the quick start. How did that come about?
Have different things that I wanted to include. It wasn't necessarily something I thought about holistically as, this is what the game is going to be, but rather here's a cool aspect of cyberpunk literature. Um, why I figured that it's a cool concept that strengthens this. I found that's why I ultimately decided to keep it. It strengthens this notion of teamwork is the important thing here. So meshing is where characters can actually join up mentally and help each other out with certain tasks. And I figured that was improve the level of cooperation between the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can.
And also to have it be, have it be based on active participation on the part of the characters as opposed to they will get to make that decision. I thought that would be more fun at the table, basically.
Oh yeah. So, with all that said, what are you shooting for as far as the total page count when it comes to the core book?
So we are, the way we've set up the Kickstarter is that it depends on the stretch goals that are unlocked, but into the core rule goes.
Oh yeah. And hold on a moment, folks, because technical issues are rearing their ugly head. But hold on one moment. As I try to salvage this particular thing, this is the most cursed night I've had in quite a while. So hold on a second. I do apologize for the technical shenanigans. Okay, hopefully that problem's been fixed.
All right, that's awesome.
Sorry,
does this mean that you're gonna have to do a lot of editing?
I'm just gonna go right through it. I just power through these things. Just a case of technology hates us all. Moving on. Before I had that little technological spat, we were talking about the page
chaos
count
aspect that you spoke of earlier.
Yeah, the page count. And you had mentioned that it is going to be dependent on stretch goals, but what were you thinking of as a baseline when it comes to the page count estimate?
$250, and but yet, if we incorporate it into, let's say, a deluxe edition later, or if we add parts of it into some of the supplements that we've planned.
Yeah, I can certainly get that, and I will definitely look forward to seeing how that develops. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness. And of course, there will be a link in the description to the Kickstarter proper for anyone who wants to back. And
Again.
yep. Uh, and of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.